sorry I had to do it, bro. Couldn't help myself.
You know, way back in...
I couldn't help myself. Sorry.
Don't ever apologize. We got you to do some liners here for 94.5 KATS, and you did that right at the peak of South Park Timmy, and I loved it, and it's helped me do my claim to fame ever since. Dee Snider, the man, the myth, the rock icon, thank you so much for giving us a call. You started House of Hair back in like 97. We picked it up here on KATS in, I think, 2001. So on behalf of all the rockers in Yakima, thank you for rocking us for over 20 years.
Dude, it's crazy. I mean, when I started that show, I'd get email from people saying, hey, you dedicate this one to my son. He was just born. And now that son is emailing me going, I've been listening to House of Hair for my whole life. I'm like, it's just nuts to watch people grow and get older and raise families, and it's also cool to sort of be a soundtrack for that for people. I love it.
Indeed. Now, you wrote your first ever book called FRATS. I'm super stoked. I plan to buy it next paycheck at DeeSniderBook.com. Tell us about the new book, FRATS.
Oh, I just want to point out the publishers push DeeSniderBook.com, and yes, if you want to buy it direct, that's awesome, but it's available wherever books are sold.
Okay,
so
good deal.
You go anywhere you want and get the book, okay? But Dee Snider book is kind of direct, you know. But be that as it may, it's actually my third book.
Oh, really?
My first was in the 80s, co-written. It was called Teenage Survival Guide, which was sort of literally what it says, you know, basically about growing up and how to survive being a teenager. In the 2000s, I wrote my memoirs myself called Shut Up and Give Me the Mic. This is a full-blown fictional novel. It's not about rock and roll. It's not about Dee Snider. It's a coming-of-age story set in the 70s in the town where I grew up, based on real events. There was a high school fraternity system, which were basically just legal gangs. You know, because they were fraternities, had charters with the police, they were allowed to roam the hallways with their colors on and just do whatever they wanted. And I grew up in that environment, and I wrote, based on actual events, but a fictitious story about a guy named Johnny Kovacs, who in his senior year moves from Ohio and is dropped in where I grew up, Baldwin, into this world that he's completely unfamiliar with. And unfortunately for Johnny, the first day at school, not knowing the lay of the land, makes a misstep, crosses the wrong people, creates enemies that he has to wind up dealing with and joining fraternity just to protect himself, and his world spirals completely out of control.
Now, with it being set in where you grew up and graduated high school from, authors do put a little bit of themselves into all their work. Would you, by chance, be Johnny? Or are you just an onlooker or just the wise custodian in the halls helping him out?
That's a really good question. Okay, one, I am portrayed. There's a group of guys who are nerdy and they sit at the lunch table and they sort of observe and they know Johnny, so they observe and they fill him in on the lay of the land. I'm one of they're called the Brets. I'm one of the Brets.
Okay.
I was just one of the outcast, weird, big dude that was just trying not to get my ass kicked in school. Okay. As far as my life, there is a romance that Johnny goes through, and I base that. People who read my memoirs will go, hey, wait a second, that sounds a lot like you and Suzette. I've been with my wife 47 years, so it's got a lot of our courtship in there. Things like her mob family threatened to kill me on the first date. So his girlfriend has a mob family, and they threatened to kill him on the first date. So there's some of that in there. And the only passing vaguest reference to me is in high school, I had a band called Dusk, D-U-S-K. And we were, in my senior year, became the band for all the dances. We were the band.
Nice.
And so at the prom, Dusk is playing. And Johnny is telling the story about his story in the book, mentions that the singer went on to become pretty famous. He mentions in passing. That's Dusk. I was in Dusk, and that's the only sort of passing reference to me.
So what made you want to go back and write kind of a coming-of-age tale instead of going into, like, the horror genre or doing a memoir part 2? Because, man, you have lived quite the life.
You know, I thought that this world of high school fraternities was just how it was. When I started touring and traveling and meeting people, and it would come up in conversation, they would look at me and go, what's a high school fraternity? Mm-hmm. And when I started telling them about it, they were like, well, first they wanted to hear more, and they were shocked. They said this was allowed, because by the 80s, these high school fraternities were literally outlawed because people were nearly being killed in these rumbles and fights. So people were so curious about this world that I grew up in, I thought it would make a good novel, a good story to tell.
Yeah. Have you thought about taking this book into a different form of medium, like maybe a TV, movie, Netflix special? A lot of rock acts are getting into the comic book and graphic novel phase. Any thoughts about doing any of that with this?
Well, I would love if someone read this book and saw its value as a screenplay, television show, or whatever. So that, as an author, you kind of hope that maybe someone will want to bring it to life. So that we'll see where that goes. Because I'm in the midst of I've written a scary movie called My Enemy's Enemy that I'm going to be directing as soon as these strikes are over. And so they got that going on. And speaking of graphic novels, next month releasing He's Not Going to Take It, a graphic novel on C2 Comics. Not just about me going to Washington to fight censorship in the 80s, but they explore how I became that voice at that moment in time. So that's going on in the graphic novel world. But right now, the novel's out, and yeah, I would love if someone picks it up, because I think it's a rich story, and there's been so many historically, whether it's the Warriors, the Outsiders, the Wanderers, people seem to enjoy stories about gangs and, in that world, So this is the 70s.
Dee Snider, his third book, first novel, FRATS, based on true events, in stores now. Purchase it wherever books are sold, DeeSniderBook.com. I'm super stoked that you mentioned graphic novels. I'm a 41-year-old comic book nerd, so I'm definitely looking forward to that one. Thank you so much, Dee. Our listeners would be very upset, pissed, if you will, if I didn't ask when Twisted Sister is going to be touring the U.S. again, and a possibility coming up to the Pacific Northwest.
Well, I'm a man of my word, and I said that we were retiring in 2016, and that's it. People reacted very positively when I said I could see Twisted getting together for a charity event for a few songs. We got together for the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame induction. I could see something like that. We're all friends, and it's fun. But going out, hitting the road, I'm just not hitting the road. I was offered a role in. They're doing a new Broadway production of Captain Hook. No, of Peter Pan. They want me to play Captain Hook, and they wanted me to go out on tour for 2 years. Playing Captain Hook and then bring it to Broadway. And I was going, I am flattered. I would be an amazing Captain Hook now that I think about it. But same time, that part of my life is done. That living out of a suitcase, I'm done.
I don't blame you. I understand. I just know our listeners love you and would love to see you live in concert.
And I love you guys, too. I love you guys, and you'll hear me on the House of Hair, and you'll see me doing movies. I got a part in a new Ben Affleck, Adam Sandler movie that's been delayed due to the strike, but you're going to still be seeing Dee Snider popping up here and there. It's just not going to be in the typical way you used to seeing me.
Gotcha. Well, you conquered the world of rock, the big and small screen, the theatrical stage, and I have no doubt FRATS by Dee Snider is going to rock, and conquered the literary world as well. People can purchase it, once again, wherever books are sold, DeeSniderBook.com to purchase it direct, and that is linked up on the KATS app. Dee Snider, the one and only, thank you so much for giving me a call, and thank you for over 20 years of rocking KATS with the House of Hair.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate you, appreciate the station, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Dee.